Hello and welcome to Paper Plays Julie K.
Welcome everyone, and thank you so much for stopping by to check out my latest video. And today I decided I've been cleaning up my craft room and organizing some leftover bits and pieces from lots of different projects. And I decided to pop on and talk to you guys about different items that I like to make or prep for future projects when I have leftover pieces of fabric, whether they came from linens or fabric, and also doilies and like leftover curtains. I use a lot of that kind of stuff, leftover linens, those kind of things in some of my projects, and I like to make a lot of different things from the leftover bits and pieces. So again, today I'm just popping on with, I think I have like somewhere between 20 and 30 ideas that I like to do with my leftover bits. So, and again, I just have samples here of like some of the fabrics and different things that I have left over. So I thought I would show you guys some different ideas. So the first thing I like to do with when I get little bits like this that maybe aren't quite as big, that you can't really do like a big like journal cover or something with, one of the things that I do like to make with little bits like this is I do like to stamp on them, and sometimes I'll just sit and mass produce. You can see I have quite a few in here of different words, mainly because that's what I use the most. You could stamp like flowers or things like that too, but I mostly stamp words because that's what I find that I use the most. And I like to make little labels out of them. I like to put laces and trims or cut up my snippet rolls and put the words on there and sew around them. So again, when I had those little bits, this is one of the items I like to do and mass produce. The second thing that I like to do with a little bit of longer pieces that look like this but still aren't wide enough to do a lot of things with is I really enjoy making rolled roses. And so here are a number of ones that I have made in the past that I do with my scraps. And I make them either with hot glue, or you can see some of these I've even sewed together. It just kind of depends upon where I'm at and how I want to put them together, because sometimes I'll take these scraps at night when I'm with my husband watching TV, and I will put one together. I do have a video where I did rolled roses like this for like a Christmas tree cone craft. So if you want to know exactly how to make these, I do have a tutorial on that video. So that's the second thing that I like to do with leftover bits. The third item that I like to do with leftover bits is when I am done with pieces, sometimes I'll look at them and kind of decide what pile to put them in. Because here's some that I pulled apart or set aside already, because these ones I'm going to make rolled roses with, so I already set them aside. I also set aside the ones for stamping, and sometimes I set aside ones that are long like this. This came off of a curtain linen that I took apart, and it just part of it's left, and I am going to put it aside to save, because I'm thinking like here's a journal that I already have made, but I'm like to save little ones like this that are long enough that you could use as a tie or a wrap on your journal. So I do separate out those ones for that reason. And then sometimes when I'm also working with some different linens, like pillowcases, those kind of things, sometimes you can take off like crocheted trims also on them, like this one, and you could also use these for ties. So I usually set them aside in a separate spot in my craft room. I do have a lot of like clear plastic bags like this that I put items like this into, and then I label them by just attaching a little tag to the zipper, so then I know what I wanted to do with them. Another item that I like to create when I have a little bit longer pieces like this, not necessarily it's, you know, too short to save for a tie. I could stamp on this one, but oftentimes I will make bases for hidden paper clips. And so like here's a hidden paper clip I've already made that I've dug out of my stash just for this video. And you can see that the paper clip part is hidden right here. And I've just decorated it with leftover laces and trims, and this is leftover from a doily. So again, a leftover bit, you know, you could put on one of your leftover doily bits on here. So here's a base that I already have made, And then, you know, here's the one that I had started, that I started for this video. You can see that I just put the paper clip over it, and then I'll just hide the paper clip and glue that on, and then I would snip it off right here, and then I have a little base ready to go. So sometimes I'll sit and just mass produce base, hidden paper clip bases when I have lots of scraps that are left like this. So that's another thing that I like to make. So on the same lines as the hidden paper clips, I do like to do these little ribbon ones. Also, you can see this one I've already glued on just a little piece of leftover fabric on it. And then I have two that have already been decorated where I just, again, put on leftover laces and trims. And I like to use these mainly just for happy mail, but you could use them on, you know, on a journal page. If you had like a little journal page, you could clip this on the top and put something on there, and that would look really nice. Also, like paper bags, I use them often for like paper bags that I've decorated and put goodies in them for like some happy mail or a gift. So I do those. And again, oftentimes I'll just sit and make the bases so they're ready to go, and then another day I'll take out my leftover laces and trims and play with them and attach them. So again, another good mass making item that you can do with your leftover material or fabric, linens. And then another idea, kind of on the same idea as the last two, is I have these little like bookmark clips. And I've done these also on my channel when I was doing the leftover little bits of lace. But I will take my leftover bits of like linens and sometimes add them onto these. So this one came off of a pillowcase. And then of course I layered on some laces and trims for my scrap pile. But I do sometimes save specific pieces if I think they'll look nice for these little clips. These are little ribbon clips, and again, this is another fun project to do mass making on. Another idea for longer strips like this is to make little ruffles. I like to make these, and I use them all the time. Like here's a tag, you could glue them onto your tags in your journals. Again, if you're sending out some happy mail, you could decorate a bag with them. You know, here's a page that I could use in a journal, and again I could glue that down on the side, and these are quite easy to do. I like to do them on my sewing machine, and I kind of like to do mine random, but you just kind of bunch them up and just run them through your sewing machine. Just put, you know, a little stitch like a zigzag stitch or something through the middle, and then you have a nice little ruffle. And you can add, like on some of these, you could add another piece of lace over it, or like on these ones, I also added a little bit of dyed cheesecloth. And again, I kind of do mine pretty random, but you can make them a little more even. This one's a little bit more even when I put it through my sewing machine, where this one's a little bit more random. This one's definitely very random with how I folded it as it was going underneath my sewing machine. So that's another item that I like to make. So out of the very scraps from my different linens that look like this, I do like to make little bows, and so I do kind of save my little bits that look like this, or even like this, and I will tie them up and I kind of store them in here, and they're kind of fun to pop on. Again, you could pop them on to a top of a tag, or you could decorate them on a little journal page also. Or you could pop them on like one of your hidden paper clips. So again, there's lots of uses for those. But again, I just find the little tiny bits that are kind of stringy like work perfect to make bows. The next thing that I like to do, and this is more of an idea with your leftover doilies. Sometimes I will find like on doilies like this that I really want to use the middles of them, or a doily like this, and I just want the little piece that's in the middle. So then you're left with this other piece that maybe looks like this or like this, and I find that these are perfect for using as frames. You can manipulate them a little bit to go around different images. So even though this one's a circle, you can kind of glue it down to make it look more like an oval, which is what I did on this one, but I used it as a little frame around the beautiful vintage woman right there. And just another idea with just these bits, like if you just have a piece left over like this, You can layer it behind something else and it'll look like it's a full doily. So if you see this white doily here in the background on this piece, it's a little folder that I created. You can, this one was one where I originally took out the middle piece because I wanted to use it. I think I actually used it right here as the flower. But you can layer it and it looks like it's a full piece. So don't forget that you can do that also with your doilies if you take apart parts of them. Next, if you have like a little bit bigger pieces of material left over, like oftentimes I've made some really fun journal covers using pillowcases, and I'll still have part of that pillowcase left over. If I have a nice piece of square left over, I like to create little envelopes, and then I stick fun things in there for Happy Mail or gifts for people. So here's one where the inside was a leftover piece of linen that I used on the inside. And then I decorated the rest of it with pretty laces and trims. Here's one that I started. The outside is like a napkin or something, linen, but then the inside is just a leftover piece of material or linen that I had left over, and I just sewed them together. And then eventually I will hand stitch them together to make a little envelope like this. And I can either leave it as is, or you can decorate it up with laces and trims. You can also do different styles. This is one I got in some Happy Mail that someone else made for me. I think Kim made me this one, but just another different style where she had used a base of some leftover linens to create another little different style of a pocket or an envelope. And on the similar lines of those envelopes, you can also make little clutches or pouches. So like here's like, this is a good idea if you have leftover rectangles of different sizes. And like this one, I would layer it with another piece because I like mine to be a little bit more sturdier. And oftentimes I'll even do like a piece of batting or a piece of felt in between two pieces of material. And you just kind of fold it over like this and that. And you can either make a long envelope or you can call it a pouch or a clutch. Here's a couple that I have got. I've made a few of these in the past. I've given them all away. But here's some that I've received in swaps that other people have made. So again, they started off with some sort of base material, and then this one she's layered a couple of times, and she has a piece of like felt or batting in the middle, so this one's nice and sturdy. This one I think is just two pieces of material. This one's a good example of just a piece of material, and then there's on the outside you can see that there's a base piece of like some sort of linen, you know, maybe a tablecloth or something on that one. And then of course you decorate them up. Here's one that I made. This one's a little bit smaller. Again, it could be, you could call it an envelope or a pouch. And again, the base, which is underneath the lace, you can see, which was just leftover material or linens. And then I decorated the rest with laces. Again, this one I used like a half a doily that I had used on something else. And right here also a half a doily. And then I just layered it up with some different pieces. So again, if you have like a half a piece of doily, that also works good as, you know, tops of your envelopes. Another idea that I like to make with my leftover linens is like little bags. These ones I haven't decorated. Oftentimes I will just make the bases and then later on I'll decorate them when I know who I'm giving it to. But this one came off of a pillowcase, so you can see the nice little lining here. So I could put, like this one is like a store-bought one that someone else decorated the front and gave to me, but they put a fun little doily flower on it. So I could do something like that, or I could put an image on there. And I could either, you know, tie it at a closure like that on the top, or you can just put a little ribbon around the top and close it, which is oftentimes how I do it. Or we talked about earlier about those hidden clips, hair clips. I could put one of those on top of here to hold the top closed on these little bags. So here's, like I said, 3 different bags that I've already started with leftover pieces of fabrics or linens. Again, these 2 I know came from pillowcases because I just made those. This one I've had in my stash for a bit. But I would decorate them up and, you know, use them again in some Happy Mail. Another idea is little pockets or ephemera holders. So here's just a base. So sometimes I will just put the bases together. And so this one, I do have 2 pieces of leftover material, and I do have a piece of felt in it because I like the stability of it. And then I will put a piece over the top for the pocket, and usually I do it at an angle, but you wouldn't have to do that. And so for these little ephemera pockets, you can see here's one that I've also made in the past, and I just stuck in like a little notebook I made and some little leftover ephemera pieces. So that's also another fun idea to make with your leftover linens. The next idea that I have is more if you have a bigger piece of linen, and a while back I had like a bed sheet that had lace on it that I wanted the lace, so I took it off. But then I was left with this material, and it had kind of some little Swiss dots on it. And so a lot of that material I used for like making journal covers, or in this case what I decided to make was just some bases for some like little folder pockets. And so I did go ahead and add some other leftover laces and trims from my stash around the edges on these. So these are just bases and they're ready to be decorated. This one again has a double pocket in it on the inside. And I think this one I just have a single pocket. This one I just did a single pocket because this one was a little bit longer. Looks like, oh, I have some extra trim in there that I thought would look nice with this when I decorate it. So I just put it in the pocket. And you know, you can decorate it kind of like how I showed you those lacy envelopes earlier. You could put a lot of lace on there, but it would also look really cute if you had a nice little, another piece of like a table covering that you could wrap around the top, and then you could even put a little tie or something on there if you wanted to. I know we saved some of our, I've saved some of my material that I could just sew this on here, and then I would have another little tie closure that way too. So, and I did pull one from my stash. I've made these before. That I showed you that one earlier with the frames. That was a little folder I made. But here was one that Kim made for me also. Again, she probably started off with some leftover linens to make her base and some leftover material, and then she went ahead and decorated it just to show you that you can get make some really pretty things if you want. But again, I just like to have some bases started, and then I can go ahead and decorate them when I know who I'm giving them to. But it's nice to have the bases already started. One of the next items that I like to create with leftover linens or fabric is I do like to make snippet rolls, and oftentimes I'll just make bases and then I'll go ahead and decorate them later. So this is one that I made with some leftover pink fabrics. I just kind of kept on adding to it, and I added some white in there. And then I went ahead, and then on top of that, then I started adding some of my laces and trims from my leftover bits pile. And I will start off sometimes as my base. Like this is a tie from a curtain that I had used some of the other material for something else. So this I think would make a great base to make a snippet roll. Also, I cut this hem off of another curtain. And so this would make another great base to make a snippet roll. So I will save those for bases. And then what I often do also is if I have scrap material that I think is good for a base for a snippet roll, is I will set it next to my sewing machine. So this one I thought was a good one to use, just a leftover piece from another project. And so then I just start pinning on when I'm working on other projects, and if I have to cut off little bits, I just start pinning it on similar stuff onto that base. And then when I think I have enough pinned on here, then I'll start sewing on my sewing machine. And so like here's just a small one that I did, just kind of that same idea with leftover laces, and I just used the bases whereas leftover material. On these couple, the leftover material was actually just like a hem piece from a wedding dress that I took apart. This again was some sort of closure from a curtain that I used on the back side of that one. And then I just layered up my leftover bits of lace, and I just leave these. Here's another one I started. And you can see so far, again, this is just some eyelet material that was left over probably from a pillowcase. And I just start pinning on my leftover bits, and then when the whole thing is full, then I go ahead and sew. And usually what I do then is I'll just sew down the middle, and then I go around the sides. And what I like to do with these is at the very first thing that I showed you guys is I stamp, you know, little sentiments on fabric, and I will lay those on here, cut it up, and maybe add 1 or 2 more pieces of complementary laces behind it, and then I'm ready to go. So that's what I like to do with my snippet rolls. That's probably my favorite thing. But I just thought I would show you a few that I have made, and then a couple that I had. You know, I had this one sitting next to my sewing machine, and I had this one sitting next to my sewing machine, because I try and just pin them on right away when I cut off leftover bits. If I'm not going to use them or save them for anything else, I just try and sew them right away or attach them to my base for a snippet roll so that it's ready to go. So on the same idea as the snippet roll, sometimes if you have like a little bigger piece like this one, I would definitely save for, if I'm not going to make like a little clutch or something out of it, like I talked about earlier, I would use this as kind of a fabric masterboard base. And so I think I have one that I used on my little bits of lace. So I do have one that I used on my little bits of lace series that I had, and I cut out parts of it already, but this one started off as a big piece of scrap material, or, you know, leftover from some sort of linen, and then I just sewed on laces on it, and I cut it apart and I already used some of the pieces, but that was one that I already had sewn and put together. But I do keep one also. Again, here's another one of that bed sheet that has the little Swiss dots on it. But I've started already on this one. I have pinned, again, when I have leftover bits, when I'm working on projects, I just go ahead and pin it. And then when I'm happy with what the whole thing looks like, once it's full, then I go ahead and sew it. But I have it just sitting right there next to my sewing machine. I think that works perfect. Then that way I'm dealing with it right away as I'm making the scraps. So again, when I have leftover doily bits, if I'm not going to use them as frames, sometimes I will make them into snippets. So I have a few snippets, and I usually put these into another cigar box that I just kind of do, you know, sometimes I'll do the leftover doily. There's a doily piece right here. Sometimes I'll layer it on top of fabric. Sometimes I put it on paper. Sometimes I'll sew a button onto it. Here's one on paper that I added. You know, this one has lace and some cheesecloth, but there's a couple different layers of doily on that one. Same with this one. This one has some doily layers, but it also has some little crocheted layers that came off of a pillowcase that I took apart, and that was just what was left. And then what I will do is, like this one, I did put it onto a top of a little paper doily, and you can add this to a journal cover, or add a paper clip to it and attach it, or you can glue it down. Just another snippet one. Here's one that I added one of those rolled roses to that I made. And then this one, you can see here's the leftover bits from the doily, and I just sewed it directly onto a piece. And if this was my journal page, you could just add it onto the side, or you could put it on the inside, and then that's what you would see hanging out. And you have a little tuck spot. So some different ideas on how you can use them. So sometimes I'll just take my leftover bits. Sometimes when I work on these, I'll see what I have for leftover paper sitting there. And so whatever day I made these, I must have done something with some music paper and had leftover music paper. So I just sewed them to music paper. Another one that has several different layers of leftover bits. This one I put on just a scrap piece of paper that must have been sitting there too, and I just sewed it on. Another little cluster. So that's another idea, is adding them, or using your leftover bits as snippet clusters. And of course you can mix and match your doilies with your fabric. And then I just wanted to show you my journal I was working on. So I did make this cute little pocket just by attaching a whole bunch of those little clusters. And I attached it onto a little piece of burlap, I think, which you can maybe see it underneath there. I had some burlap, and so I just attached a bunch of those leftover doily remnant pieces onto that. So I just wanted to show you like a practical application for it also in a journal. Sometimes I also like to use my leftover doilies, and then sometimes I'll add leftover linens also, but I like to make page huggers or bag huggers. So here's one that went over a page, like a journal page, that you would just attach onto a journal page, and you could glue it down. And then you could have a little tuck spot if you wanted to. Here's one that I haven't added to anything, but I have started just with leftover bits. I had all these doilies right here that had like, when I bought them, they had stickers on them and I could never get that part off. So a lot of those went up to being, you know, I just snip them up and use them on projects. But you can see here, I did actually then also add the kind of the cluster to the top of the bag. But you could also, I sewed this one directly on, but you could just put it on like this and then put a little paper clip or one of those. Earlier we talked about those hair clips. You could use one of those too to attach one of these to the top of a page. I also like to use my leftover bits of doilies, but you can also use fabric. This one has both to little page edgers. So you can see on the pages, this one I'd sew directly onto the page. Sometimes I'll just prep them on a piece and then I'll go ahead and sew them or glue them down later to the edges. You know, that one's pretty basic. This one came off of a pillowcase. This one I just decided to put on the corner or the bottom. And then another one here too that came off of a couple different things. But again, you can use your leftover doilies and also your leftover fabric or linens, because you can see like this one, I had some linen on that one. Another quick idea that I often will mass produce is I will take some of my leftover fabric and just use them as bases for page tabs. So here was one that I had in my stash that I just pulled out, and you can see there's, you know, some leftover like trims on there, but this also was a leftover piece from a curtain, and then this was some leftover fabric, and then you go ahead and either sew it or you can glue it onto a page, and then you have a little tab on it, and you can make them all any sort of size you want. But that's another idea. Another quick idea is just sewing it or gluing it to the top of a page to make a fabric flip. This one came off of a pillowcase that I used a lot of this, and I just had this little piece left over that I thought was perfect for fabric flip, and then I went ahead and also added a piece of leftover trim from my stash. I also like to make with leftover bits. Sometimes I'll have like, if I have an embroidered pillowcase and I've used most of it but not all of it, and I still have little pieces left of it that I think are pretty, I like to make page toppers, or you can make, you know, journal cover toppers, and that's what I did with these. They still need to be decorated a little bit more, but they're just the bases and they're ready to go. Like even this one you can see, so I had the embroidered piece left over. I had a piece left over from a doily that I kind of sewed around it to make it look like a frame, and this one I was thinking like I could add that little flower or even one of my rolled roses to the top of that one. And of course you could just put it on a page if you wanted it for a page topper. But if you had a journal, and I had pulled this one out earlier in the video, you could just glue this onto the cover of your journal. And again, I would add a few more details to it, like some flowers or something. But I think that's really pretty journal cover, you know, with just a few more embellishments added. So I do like to sometimes use my leftover bits just to make page toppers or journal toppers, and they're kind of ready to go with just a little bit more embellishing if you want when you're working on a journal. So I think we've reached at least 20 or pretty close to 20 ideas, and I just have a few more left to share with you guys. Another idea that I like to do with my leftover linens or material is sometimes I will just sew it to paper tags, and then I have a nice little base ready to go, and then I can decorate it at my leisure later on. But these, again, leftover. This came from a hanky. This was from some sort of like curtain, I believe. Someone had gifted me part of this, so I only received a remnant of it. And then this one was just a lace one that I had in the same stash as these that I accidentally grabbed. So I didn't mean to grab that one for this video, but you can just see that again that I just sewed them onto bases, but you could also just glue them down too. And then again, later on, you could decorate them like, you know, you could even put one of these little toppers on one of these, and then you have a decorated tag ready to go. So sometimes you can mix and match your things. The next idea for using leftover linens is you can make some pretty nice pockets on your journal pages. And here's a couple that I haven't done anything with, but I set aside that I think would make really nice pockets. Again, this came off of a pillowcase or a bed sheet, and I used most of it for something else. But I would go ahead and just sew this around the sides, and then you have a nice little pocket. Here was one that someone had gifted me. It's a vintage piece, but I thought I did go ahead and I just sewed a little hem on the top. But again, this one I think I'm going to sew onto a journal page. And then again, with this leftover piece, I think it would make a really nice pocket. And so I have a couple of samples, and then of course, besides a pocket on a journal page, you could add a pocket onto a tag. So here's like a partial handkerchief that I had left over, another piece that came off of a pillowcase that I just added to a base, and again, just making pockets. Here's another one that came from like a cloth napkin, and I just liked the trim around it. I'd used it maybe on a journal cover or something, but I had that little bit left and I saw potential in it. Here's another little piece that was gifted to me from somebody else. It was a bigger piece that came off of some sort of linen or a curtain. And so I'd use some of that. Again, a handkerchief that I made into some pockets. I had part of that left over. This one I thought was kind of cool. It's old, it's vintage, it's holey. But I thought somebody went to all this trouble to do some embroidery work, and they didn't finish around here. But I used the other part of it for something else. But I just thought it was so pretty that I had to figure out. And it was just this weird little triangle shaped thing. But again, I thought, well, I could make some sort of, I could add it on as some sort of pocket. So that's what I went ahead and did on this tag. I could have made it into a belly band too. But I decided to sew it down on there. Again, another partial handkerchief. And this one, what I did, because I only had half of it, is I just sewed it on both sides of this paper for a journal page. And this one again, another just scrapbooking piece of paper, but I had a partial left over from a handkerchief, and so I thought it was so pretty that it would make a nice little long pocket. Another little side pocket or shorter pocket. This one was a leftover like doily remnant that I made into a pocket on this journal page. Same with this one. It was like a leftover tablecloth piece, and so I did sew it on the edge, and then I also added a little trim on the top of that one. And let's see, this one, also, I just wanted to show you guys, this is one that I had also made. I had a leftover piece, and I ended up not using this as a journal cover yet, but I did have a leftover piece right here, and I just added it as a long pocket inside of that one. So I thought I would show that as an example since I haven't done anything with that one yet. The next idea that I like to do with leftover linens is I do like to use them as in scrappy pads in my junk journals. So you can see this one, I had like some sort of piece of leftover linen like this, and I just wrapped it over the top of some scrap paper, and I decorated it up a little bit. And so that, what you could do a scrappy pad that way. I also, again, this I think came from a leftover handkerchief, and I thought it was so pretty that it would make a nice little like cover for maybe a little mini scrappy pad. So I just put it over some random pages, and you could still go ahead and add some decoration to it. I still have another little quarter piece of that one. And then I was thinking the same thing. I would maybe figure out something I could do with this one similar. I just haven't done anything with that one yet. But I was thinking that might make some sort of nice little cover for some sort of little scrappy pad on that one. So I had that one set aside. I know earlier in the video I talked a little bit about some flowers, those rolled roses. I have a few more different flower ideas you can use with leftover bits. So I did have a wedding dress that I took apart that I wanted the appliques on it, and I got the wedding dress relatively cheap for the appliques, but then I had all the material left. So you can make these really pretty singed flowers. Sometimes people call them lollipop flowers. And then you can layer material or lace tulle, just different things in between them. And then, let me see, yeah, then you can go ahead and add like some bling or a button to the middle. So you can make those types of flowers. This particular flower was made from a curtain, some linen off of a curtain. And then I have a little doily remnant piece in the middle. A friend of mine made this little loopy flower. And then I made one, but I haven't put, like, I need to put a piece of bling or something in the middle. But these ones are kind of fun because what you do is you start off with a piece of, like, material like this. This one's something I cut apart. And it's already somewhat sewed together. It was probably the base of a pillowcase is probably what it was. But what you do is you just cut in a whole bunch of strips, like how this is. And then once you have your little strips, then you can go around, you just glue it around a circle, and then you end up with something that looks like this. It's a little loopy flower. And my friend, crafty friend Amy Love gave me this one. And I think she has a tutorial somewhere on this on her channel because I watched it. So, but here was a version of it that I made that I just didn't do anything with. I just have it in here for waiting for the right project. You can also layer up all your leftover doily pieces if you have little remnants. You can make little flowers. This one's made from some different linens. You can see like some curtains pieces on here, some other pieces that I cut off of some sort of curtain. And then there's some doily pieces and there's some applique pieces in here too. And also here's some folded pieces from some material in that one. So you can make all sorts of fun little flowers. Another little flower that I made by folding up leftover curtains. This was one that somebody else made for me too with leftover bits. And so there's all sorts of flowers you can make with leftover pieces. And I'm sure there's a lot more ideas out there, but the last idea that I wanted to share with you guys was just using your leftover linens for journal cover bases. So here was, probably came off of a curtain. Somebody gifted me some of this material and I had a couple of different pieces of it. This one I am going to make into a journal cover or a couple of journal covers. I might double it up and then fold it, and then I got kind of a nice thick one. But one of the pieces I did go ahead and I did sew around it so that it would quit fraying. The little bit of fraying doesn't matter to me, but I just wanted it to stop. And then I also added, so that's what that one looks like. I didn't do anything from there, but I also had another piece of material left over from some other project. And so I did go ahead and just sew around this one and added a pocket because I was thinking maybe I would pair these two together and make a journal out of it. So I have that one started. Also, if you have like a bunch of like leftover pieces, this came off of some sort of linen that I had. And it had several embroidered flowers on it. It was a tablecloth or something. I used one of them on here, but you could kind of make like a little scrappy cover. Here is another one that came from another linen or a pillowcase. Same with this one too. So I just kind of made a little scrappy cover on that one for a journal cover. And then I even sewed one in on the inside. And I kept part of the handkerchief in here, just thinking that this would match for a journal page. So I kept that in there. I'm going to keep this in here too in case I want to use it as a page flip or something in the journal. But so that was the last idea that I kind of had for today, was to use your leftover pieces of linen for, if they're big enough, you could definitely make journal covers. And so I think I got close to 30, but maybe I got somewhere between like, oh, if I was counting right, 26, 27 ideas for using up your leftover linens and doilies. and fabric on different projects. And I wanted to thank everybody so much for watching. Hopefully a few of these ideas inspired you to use some of your leftover bits for some of these ideas. And of course, if you have other ideas, I would love for you guys to drop those in the comments. Just so as when I clean up after projects and I'm sorting out how to use the leftover material and doily bits, how I want to use them in future projects, or if I just want to make some bases for things. If you have some other great ideas, I would love to hear them. So don't forget to leave those comments. And as always, thank you guys so much for watching. I hope you have a wonderful day and happy crafting.